Hello and welcome to Breaking Down the Biz, where we make sense of the business of music, entertainment, and tech. I am your host, Seth Schachner, with Strat Americas in Los Angeles. We have a really special episode today. Today we're sitting down with members of a band called Ivy, a group that many of us, certainly of a certain vintage, know and love and have a tremendous amount of respect for, and are even touched by in many respects. Not just because of nostalgia, but because of what I would call the enduring quality of this artist's music, which to me still sounds great today. And there's a lot of new stuff to talk about as well. The briefest background, Ivy came out of downtown New York, Manhattan's music scene. I would say perhaps a bit by chance. And it broke through in the 90s, mid to late 90s, with some tracks like I've Got a Feeling and something that a lot of you have probably heard but may not recognize called Edge of the Ocean. This group has experience with both major labels and independent labels, and I would say a very impressive amount of television and film experience as well. And that's kind of the business background. The band also had what I would call an enormous loss. One of its founding members, who was also a member of Fountains of Wayne, left us a few years ago, Adam Schlesinger, due to COVID, basically. Really an enormous loss in many senses. But the group came back together and released a new record called Traces of You last year, in part in tribute to Adam, for sure. So, we're really, really thrilled today to talk about the resilience of this artist, the artistic integrity in the face of lots of industry change and tragedy, across several decades of performing. So Andy Chase, Dominique Duran, and Bruce Driscoll, welcome to Breaking Down the Biz. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Cool.
Good intro. Very good intro.
Yeah, well, I love you guys. So, look, I want to start. I don't want to, bury the lead, as they say in journalism, but I kind of want to start with, the elephant in the room, if you will. I think it's an enormous factor. You had an enormous loss. Someone left you. And I'll let you go through this in much greater detail if you wish. But as I understand it, you went back to a storage locker somewhere in New England and Rhode Island and found unreleased material, archive material, and pulled it together for at least one new record. And we, as fans and in the music community, have this wonderful kind of reunion, if you will. Could you speak to what happened and what went into the thinking of this?
So April 1st, 2020, Adam passed away from COVID-19. And he only got sick 2 weeks before. So it was a very absolutely crazy, shocking event. And then the timing was just so strange because at the same time, our record company back then, which was Network Records, called us and said, by the way, your contract is over. Do you want to renew? Or it had been 15 years. So what do you want to do with your back catalog? And, so of course, Andy and I were just so overwhelmed with the shock of losing Adam. And then suddenly we had to give a response to them and say, what do we do with that? And so we thought about it a little bit. And because of Adam's passing, I just felt like we needed to go back to the roots in some ways. So I thought about reaching out to Mark Lipsitz, who had signed Ivy back in 93, on this label called Seeds Records, who was part of Atlantic Records. So anyway, I reached out to him, and he was working at Barn on Records, which is a label that I love, a local New York City label that started in the late 70s, and very iconic New York City. So I loved, it seemed like all it just made sense to me, like going back to our roots with Mark and re-releasing our back catalogs. So while we were starting to do that, we had to go back to all our, master tapes and all our old work. And in the process of that, Andy and I discovered all these old, unfinished projects, songs, pieces of music, and there was so many, it was overwhelming. And it just sort of gave us an idea that maybe we should, yes, Ivy is no longer because Adam disappeared, but there's still this music out there. And we just felt compelled and in a way inspired to try to do something with it. And so we reached out to Bruce, because Bruce, being has been in the Ivy world for so long, 20 years. And he was one of the rare musicians that Adam had 100% respect for. So we felt like, we asked Bruce if he wants to be part of this, project, because Andy and I could not do it alone, just the two of us. It would have been too much, and we needed someone objective and a talent like him too. And so that's kind of the story.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Is it so? Did even at present and going back, did all of you write the songs? Was it an exercise in songwriting skills as well, or did you kind of do this on your own in terms of the new tracks for the new record that you pulled together?
It was a group effort. Every part of it really was. It had to feel true to Ivy, and we had to love them. And when we first started writing them, I don't think they even knew if it would come out. I think we were just seeing where it would go, and if we would like what we were doing. And we started to really love the songs we were making, and we got more and more and more, and to the point when we had about 22 finished songs.
Yeah. The new record's wonderful. I mean, were most of the tracks, like, what state of like completion were they in? Did you have to completely re-engineer these things, or were they some of them partially made, or?
Yeah, every which way. I mean, the only mandate that we had between me, Dominique, and Bruce was we can't consider finishing an idea that didn't have Adam on it initially. So, but there were so many songs throughout our career since '94 to 2011 that we had 40 or 50, some completely finished, with lead vocals, everything, and some just sort of jam sessions with me, Dominique, and Adam. So there were, what I would call sketches. There were demos. There were almost fully finished songs, and we just, the only rule we had was we sort of wanted to take them from where they were and tweak them in a way that our 2023, 2024 senses push them to. And we just had a rule that we Adam had to be on it. So if, for example, we had a sketch from 1997 that we're trying to finish now in 2023, me, Dominique, and Bruce, if we didn't like the bass line that Adam was playing, then we either had to get rid of the song, or we had to figure out a way to make the song work with the bass line that Adam was playing. We couldn't finish it if Adam wasn't on it.
Yeah. And maybe we can talk about it a little bit later, but I think it sounds like there was more material that you recorded and prepped than has been currently released on the new record, Traces of You, yeah?
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah. I'd like to go back because I also think there's a really extraordinary history outside of the tragedy as well. Those of us of a certain vintage grew up in the 90s, listened to bands like you, House of Love, Lloyd Cole, Matthew Sweet. There's a world around us. I see a lot of heads nodding there. Let's talk a little bit about how you came together, because I think there's a bit of opportunism in it as well, and it's a good story. Maybe you could speak to that, Dominique.
Sure. So I moved to New York in '89 from Paris. I just came thinking that I would stay for 6 months to a year just to learn English, to come back to Paris being fluent in English. And I didn't know anybody. I just, I had no money. I was just whatever, like a young, crazy, highly spirited person. And so music was my passion. So I went to every club in the East Village by myself, and just, watching bands and being around musicians and blah, blah, blah. Eventually I met Andy, who was, a musician trying to make it. And then he was looking for a member for his band, a bass player. And so he put an ad in the Village Voice. That was in 1990. And I told him, I said, you should be very specific with the kind of band that influences you, because that's going to attract the right people. Because otherwise, and sensibility is everything in songwriting and music. So I helped him a little bit, but we picked, 4 bands. And I think it was
This
The
is for
House of Love.
me being the singer.
This is for Andy, right? This
Yeah.
is for
At the
Andy. Yeah, it
time,
was
she
not
was
me.
my
I was not a
girlfriend.
musician.
Yeah.
Oh, you didn't even know House of Love or the Go-Betweens or some of these great bands.
Yes,
Go
The
ahead. Go
House
ahead.
of Love, the Go-Betweens, Prefab Sprout, and what was the other one? There was another one, kind of obscure.
Maybe the Cure. I can't remember. I don't know.
No,
Whatever.
even the Cure was too famous because they were very obscure, right? And who responds? Adam Schlesinger, who was also a musician trying to make it, as a songwriter. And he reached out to Andy and said, I can't believe you know this band. You're like the only American that I know who actually really not only knows this band, but love them. So anyway, they met, and that was the first introduction. Basically, that's how they met.
So this was a classified in the Village Voice. Is that how this?
Yeah.
So
Yes.
for listeners not of a certain age, the Village Voice was a very cool downtown New York publication that I think is long gone, basically.
Yes.
Okay, and Guest Room was a record I think that came out a little bit later that had all these wonderful covers on it as well, right?
Yeah.
That was our homage to our influences. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, maybe you could speak to that, Andy, whether it's you or Dominique and also Bruce. Like, what were you listening to at the time that really went into this? I mean, maybe just expand on a couple of the other artists.
Well, first of all, the Guest Room was a covers record, which we did because Dominique was pregnant with our soon-to-be son, Julian, and we couldn't tour. So we didn't want to make a new album because new album, new material, we'd be compelled to tour. So we tried to do like a stopgap at that period where she was pregnant and expecting. So we were like, well, why don't we do a covers album of like all, and then Dominique was like, why don't we cover all the songs in that Village Voice ad? We'll do a Prefab Sprout song. We'll do a House of Love song.
The Go-Betweens.
The Go-Betweens. So we did. We covered, our favorite songs from those bands and more. And we're really, really excited about it. I mean, the interesting part of that story when Adam and I met, going back to the 1990 Village Voice ad, is that Adam came with his friend Chris Collingwood, who they ended up years later forming a band called Fountains of Wayne. But at the time, Adam and Chris were coming to try to poach me to be the guitar player with Chris singing. And my ad clearly stated, I'm the singer looking for a guitar player and or a bass player. So they left realizing that it wasn't going to work out. And as soon as they left, Dominique had been hiding in the bedroom. They never met her. I sheltered her off into the bedroom because I had an important business meeting. So after they left, Dominique said, that guy, Adam, I don't know what he's like, but he sounds really cool, because she had been listening through the door the whole time. So that was really the beginnings of it. That was, Adam didn't realize it, but he had sort of met Dominique, even though he never saw her.
So
that's how we treated women back then.
I was going to say, this is definitely, we're in the 90s right now, so definitely not the best example. I think we're jumping around a little chronologically, but, let's talk about Atlantic and long distance, how it changed things for you just a bit. Did it take you to a certain level, change your approach, help or hurt your experience as a band? Maybe you could speak to that when you really started to really break out, if you will, to the popular, maybe, bigger markets in the US and globally.
Well, it's an interesting question, because as a band, we've really tried everything. We've done the very indie label to big major, like we did Atlantic Records, Sony Music. And then we went back at the end to in between, like Network Records. I mean, it's independent, but they still have quite a lot of,
Yeah.
So I think, I think we were lucky to start on a small indie label because we were, very inexperienced. We were very naive and we were very unprofessional. And so they helped us to sort of nurture us and make us understand how things were working. And they were very supportive. And this is actually Mark Lipsitz, who also passed away, unfortunately, sadly, just last year. But so he's the one that signed Ivy back in 93. And so he was very, very nurturing, and it was great for us. And then later, when we became a little more professional, we went to Straight Atlantic Records. And that's great too, because of course they have a lot of means. And so they could support us going on tour a lot, pay for the tour support. So that was fantastic. But at the same time, because when you're on a big label like that, they also don't, they don't pay attention to you that much. They throw money at you. So that's great. But, if you're not, as you know, if you don't be on the radio, if you're not selling records, then they sort of like, let you go or just don't. Yeah. So, but we were actually lucky enough because we never really like sold records or anything like that, but we were licensed quite a lot in our career.
Licensed to TV shows, movies.
Yeah, licensed to movies and TV shows. And so we were able to stay with Major for quite a while. But I would say me personally, my choice would be to be on an indie label because even though it's more difficult because you have no money and so you can't go on tour, I just love the feeling of, being a team. It's creatively too. Like, these people really care about your music and, they're holding your hands through the, every step. And I love that. I just love feeling, teamwork.
In the current record, so we're going to jump around a little bit up to the future, though. But, I don't know who needs a major label these days. I worked at Sony for many years myself. And even most of the artists I work with don't even always think about major labels. They think about self-distribution and social media. Is the new record, so how was that distributed? Is that through an independent interest? And is there any other support from labels or marketers on that? Or you guys did it on your own?
Well, we are releasing it through Born on Records. So it's a New York City label, but old, like sort of iconic from the late 70s, I think, or early 80s. They signed, the Phillies, Alex Chilton. I mean, a lot of very cool bands.
Yeah.
And the guy who discovered Ivy, Mark Lipsix, worked at Barnum. So after Adam passing, we went back to him and we re-released our old back catalog. And then the new record came out later. But yeah, they're great.
Mark discovered us in 1993. He was working for an independent label called Seed. And years later, he's now working at Bar None, another great independent label in New York City. And we gave him everything we'd ever done in our whole entire career, including this new album, Traces of You. So Bar None, under Mark's watch, released Traces of You, all our new songs with Adam on them, just recently in September of 2025.
And I'd like to talk a little bit about the business side of Ivy, which I also think is an extremely interesting set of circumstances. I mean, again, we're chatting about things like the Village Voice and classified ads. And, some of this is a little different these days. I've spent a ton of time watching digital music develop as a business from its earlier days. And I wonder, did digital change anything for you? Do you see yourself as half analog, half digital, or is it just kind of another platform for you guys to get your music out there?
Are you talking in terms of streaming or like creating the music digitally?
Both. I mean, what's interesting to me is, from this new record, we spend, the industry spends countless amounts of hours now talking about AI. Sometimes that's all I hear actually these days, what AI is doing to music and AI copyright law and AI ad nauseum. And the reality is I don't even know if consumers are listening to it in the way that justifies all the, the commentary. But there's a lot of music creation with AI, whether it's from current artists or new artists or just virtual artists. And you've taken something that was in the archives, right? That you fished out in Rhode Island. It seems to me to be an interesting counterpoint to AI, actually. So I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, exactly. I was actually going to bring that up. Me personally, I'm a very old-fashioned woman, and I'm so nostalgic from that area where you had, reel-to-reel tape, 16 track, where you could only do, a few takes of vocal because, you didn't have room otherwise. And then the way you mix was cutting the tape. I mean, I know it sounds crazy, but that's the way we did it. And it was extremely, in a way, difficult, but that's all we knew and we loved. And the sound, I'm sorry, but the sound was magical. I mean, the analog sound, you can't beat that up.
Sure, warmer, definitely.
Yeah. So, of course, then I remember when the first CD came out, that was I still remember that. That was insane. We were like, what? Wait, a CD like this small, and you put it in the, and then of course, as a musician, you adapt to whatever is throwing at you. You have to. And then when we were recording in the studio, suddenly it's like Pro Tool. And so it's a big change, and then you get used to it and everything. But, and of course, it's so much easier today to record. It's so much cheaper to record. But at the same time, it sort of lost its magic. And so when Andy and I were going back to the storage room, in Rhode Island, and having to carry all this like reel-to-reel tape, and, we had, I don't know, 30 tapes. They were so heavy. And then we had to, to burn them, and we had to like bake them because they didn't work. We had to find a place somewhere in America where you could find a studio that could actually play them. I mean, it was so complicated and so gave us a headache. And that's when you sort of realize, oh my God, thank God for today's world. Like, it's so easy now. It's like, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So, there's pluses and there's minus for sure.
But I'd have to say what's interesting about Traces of You is that even though it came out in September of 2025, it really was based on songs and ideas and things that had been recorded throughout our career, which was always analog, always, not digital. So me, Dominique, and Adam were lucky enough, like we had our own recording studio in New York City. It was called Stratosphere Sound. And, of course, we had Pro Tools, we had every digital DAW, but we had analog tape machines and an old Neve mixing board from 1978. So all the way up till the end of our sort of run in 2012, we were not recording digitally. We were recording analog. It might go into the computer eventually, but everything that we tracked was analog. And so when we got together, me, Dominique, and Bruce, going through all our ideas with Adam on them to try to flesh them out into what would be Traces of You, they all were analog. So it's really interesting. So Traces of You, the basically the backbone of all these Traces of You songs are all analog. And anything that we did together, me, Bruce, and Dominique in 2023, 24, to finish these songs, that was digital. So Traces of You is really like an amalgam of the two, an era gone by and what's happening today.
Oh, that's wonderful. Let me talk a little bit about another thing that's happened, and I don't know what your thoughts are on it, but what do you make of social music and social media? And has any of this stuff, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, YouTube, have any of these communities help you either come together or in some way help promote the music, or is it also kind of something that's from a different part of your thinking musically?
Oh God! Well,
Bruce is our resident social media expert because
because he's younger,
and he's also got an amazing band with his wife called Freedom Fry, and they're killing it. So we, anytime we have a social media question, we just call Bruce.
Okay.
I think it's not doesn't come naturally to any of us as much as it might to someone in their 20s. But these guys have been great at doing it, and thankfully we have someone who helps us with the Ivy posts, and she's kind of advising us, oh, you could do a post like this. And I think it's helpful because I think we're all really about the songs and maybe the art, the album art, like old school about that, and the music videos too. And that's where we want our creativity to really be focused. So I think the social media can be a good tool to get the word out about stuff, but it can also be a little draining if you have to think about it too much. Or I get drained if I have to think about that stuff more than the part I love, which is just writing songs. I think all of us are more in that headspace. We want to be producing songs, not worried about Instagram. But there's so many Ivy fans out there, and it's been cool to see them, commenting on stuff. And what was the thing we did, Andy? It was like a Bandcamp release.
It was our record release on Bandcamp.
It was live, and we got to listen to the album with everybody on Bandcamp, and everyone was commenting and asking questions. I thought that was really cool. It was
surprising how many people were there, but I have to say that I feel like we got lucky to have had our foot in the door when we did in the early to mid 90s, because the social media stuff is so not in our DNA, and it didn't need to be, because back in our day when we started, there was no such thing. So it was like, you basically, if the record company liked you, they'd sign you, and thank God, because if we were just starting out now as Ivy, like, we'd be in trouble. We'd be in serious trouble. Dominique would be doing like one post every 4 months. And it would be a post of like our kids, you know,
No, not even. No.
or like our cat.
No. I just
It's
think
just, we're lucky, I have to say.
but I think today, again, there's no choice. If you're a musician and you starting today, that's part of your job as a musician. It's self-promoting yourself on social media. And I find that extremely sad personally, because when you're a creative person, you should not have to worry about that. You should just focus on creating your music, creating your image, whatever it is, and not spend time self-promoting. I mean, self-promoting, sure, like playing gigs, like reaching out to an audience, that for sure. But all the stuff about self-promoting yourself, I just, a little bit, to connect with your fan base. But no, I think that's just not, I don't like it.
Spoken like a girl from the 90s.
Okay. Fair enough. But let me, also, I mean, I can't ignore, you've had for whatever, any artist, I think a lot of TV and sync and motion picture experience, right? I mean, I think a lot of people would recognize Edge of the Ocean. That's great. Did that happen? How did that happen opportunistically? And is it something you might think about going forward? Because there still could be tons of interest from brands or other entities out there in this music.
Well, I think for us, there was many, it happened, one, because of the record company and, pitching our songs to people. And, some music supervisor were big Ivy fan, and they thought, and, it was the early 90s. It was like a new thing, sort of like having indie bands like us being put into TV shows or movies. It wasn't really like that before. So we were like one of the first bands to be sort of thrown into this new genre. Okay. And also we got lucky because the Fairley brothers were huge Ivy fan, and they put our songs into most of their movies. So that helped us a lot, things like that. It's just like, it's luck and good timing. But I think today it's, again, it's much harder because now every band, sign, unsigned, whatever, they all want to be in, TV shows and so the competition is tremendous and the pay is much less.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you'll get to LA. I know you're coming out here on tour, and we have, some small streamers like Netflix with so much programming that I'm sure some of it would fit there. Yeah. One last question, just given, that the catalog still sounds great as well. Did you, in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been this kind of gold rush for artists who write their songs. As well as just master recordings to in some way, sell some of those rights or capitalize on it. Did it ever cross your radar? Sorry if it's an offensive point, but it's so many artists jumped in from New York, from Blondie to you name it. Did that idea ever come across your radar to perhaps sell the rights?
Of course, it's come up in conversation, but like we were signed for many years. Our publishing of our songs was signed to Universal Music and Polygram Publishing, and so we know what it's like to sort of to sell a piece of 50% of our song that we wrote is owned by somebody else because they gave us some money for it. So we early on, I think after that experience selling some of our publishing, we just decided that we really wanted to be free agents. We like, to our core, in our DNA, we're like indie artists. Like, we're very sort of vehemently independent, and that independence comes with a price. Like, maybe you don't monetize it as much, but we'd be hard pressed to go back and recreate those days with somebody who wants to buy our catalog. We like knowing that we own our own music, and But if you want to make an offer, we're right here.
Okay, well, when you come out to LA, we'll talk. Okay, and Bruce, you've got so much going on too, so we'll have to have a chance to talk about that. So look, this has been fabulous. What's next? Are you've got some tour dates? Is there a possibility of a second record? What are you thinking about a second?
There is a second record. It's already done because we did 2 albums of material. Like, we didn't know it was one record and then another. We did 22 songs. And when we were done, we thought, oh, we'll do, like a Peter Frampton, like a double crazy triple album. And then we decided, okay, let's put an album out in the fall of 2025, and the remaining songs will be on our second album, and that'll be the fall of 2026. So Excellent. That's our plan. And so we're touring in support of the first album, Traces of You, and we're touring in May. We're doing New York and Chicago and LA. We're doing a festival in Wells, Nevada. All the tour dates are on our website. But we're playing shows in May, and then in the fall we expect the remaining songs, the second album, will come out. And if the shows go well in May, then we'll do shows again.
Excellent. All right. Well, look, it's been so great chatting with you guys. Hope you can tell we love you, and it's congrats on all of this. It's really wonderful to see you back.
Thank you.
And
so much.
We'll look forward to seeing you out here in LA as well when you're here.
Thank you so
Great
much.
meeting you.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.
All right. Thank you.